American investments to bolster climate resilience.
So it looks like we're good, Ollie. We're all clear. Well, since I'm on the topic, this wasn't the planned discussion, but you've had taken a lot of protest heat during your term. Just some reflections on that. How has that made you feel to be a target when you're trying as best you can to invoke clean policies and have had some great successes?
Yeah, look, different folks have different theories of change. And I'm not going to come up here and scorecard the various theories of change. What I know is there's a lot of energy all across the country to engage on climate and to engage in the democratic process, and both of those things are good. So I welcome that. When it comes with bilateral dialogue, I appreciate it. I think there's room for disagreement on the policy path forward. The way we approach energy transition. We should give folks the space to have that conversation, whether it's people who want to move faster or slower or see the path as linear or nonlinear. What I think there isn't room for in 2024 is people just straight up denying climate change. I don't think that's grounded in reality, the science, and while we don't need to call them names, we need to turn down the volume on that.
Oh, outstanding. Maybe you'll be a protester on the other side there, what we're hearing. Well, that is a great attitude, by the way, and you were a good sport about that a couple of years ago, and I completely agree with you. It's important to have that conversation and that dialogue. And there's too much just shutting down discussion altogether. So that's a great attitude to have on that. So let's talk about a couple of your achievements over the course of the past few years, and some of the things that you helped steward. The bipartisan infrastructure law, the Inflation Reduction Act. These are landmark pieces of legislation moving us towards our target cut of 50% on greenhouse gases by 2030. One of the things we want to talk about are the next steps that we'll see impact from in this legislation. What's next on the agenda for U.S. client leadership? And we'll talk a little bit about, of course, geopolitics and how that plays with we are foreign policy. So we want to see how that plays globally. But let's start with what we can see next on the agenda from the U.S., broadly speaking.
Yeah, look. First of all, from the perspective of the Biden-Harris administration, we're focused on running through the tape here in the next 3-4 months. And part of that means continuing to finalize critical rules that will facilitate capital formation through the tax code, technology-neutral tax credits that will stimulate investment in hydrogen that's produced in a clean way. So you'll see that from us in the next few months. You'll see us continue to implement the grant and loan programs, finalize some of the regulatory measures. But I think there's the stuff we have to do right away, and then there's the broader view. Right. When I think about where we are, this is the decisive decade for climate action, according to the UNFCCC. We're at halftime, essentially. And the way we, I think, make progress is by picking up gains in the industrial sector, picking up gains in the agriculture sector, both of which in the last few years have proven out playbooks that work. 80,000 farms are signed up for climate-smart agriculture now, a new source of revenue for family farmers. And there's a farm bill that Congress is overdue on that provides an opportunity to leap forward. In the industrial sector, we went from too hard to decarbonize to actually companies putting investment into clean steel, clean cement, clean aluminum, asphalt, flat glass, the big, heavy producers of emissions. And there's work in Congress underway on that.
Hard to abate was barely a term 5 years ago.
Yeah,
and yes, we've had Secretary Vilsack on this stage, and we'll have a food forum later this afternoon talking about some of those smart agriculture initiatives. So I think that's a great place to play. Let's talk a little more about communities in the U.S. just for a minute before we go global. How can we help some of those local economic zones that are very reliant on fossil fuels, economic production of, This is a big issue politically. How can we help them achieve this type of a goal moving forward with us so that they feel that they're coming along on the green transition and not just losing their jobs and their economic benefit? What can we do to enfranchise them?
Yeah, first of all, I think we need to be really concerted in coding the right economic incentives into the build out of the clean energy economy. And I think the perfect example of that is the energy communities tax bonus when you invest in the United States. That literally gives you 10% more tax credit if you're going to places that have seen job loss as a result of the energy transition. Or the 48C tax credit, which is focusing on de-risking CapEx into manufacturing in places that have seen job loss because of fossil loss. So that's thing number one, is how do we get the incentives right? And I think we have in large part done that. We can continue to lean into it, but capital formation in places that have seen economic loss is critical. The second is, how do we actually do the important work of building the capacity in the communities to pull in this investment? That's why we launched at the beginning of this administration a thing called the Energy Communities Interagency Working Group. I co-chair it. The NEC director co-chairs it. The Secretary of Energy does. And we've been able to bring tens of billions of dollars into these communities and re-leverage assets people thought were going to get left behind. So the interconnection that sits behind a coal plant that maybe retired a few years ago, using that as the plug-in point for clean energy. Re-leveraging refineries that maybe were not seen as viable anymore as part of the advanced biofuels or hydrogen economy. So I think that's the second piece that's critical. The third is we've got to be in constant conversation. And, you know, one of the things we've learned in the dialogue and the engagement is the importance of the federal government to lean in to make sure that community benefit agreements and union density actually rise in the clean energy sector to match and frankly exceed what was there in legacy industries. And I'm proud to report we're at 2x union density in the clean energy sector relative to the private sector. I think that's because we listened and then we leaned in.
2x union density more
in clean energy,
in clean energy
than the rest of the private sector.
Great, got it. Excellent. Let's go global and talk a little bit about U.S. leadership in the climate stage. Sort of reestablished over the course of the past few years.
Absolutely reestablished.
Tell us a little bit about the role that international collaboration plays in this climate fight. We talked a lot yesterday at our health forum about how there are no borders when it comes to pandemics. There are not a lot of borders when it comes to climate either.
So the first is this impacts piece. I think we have launched a really successful initiative in the form of Prepare. This is an effort to bring early warning systems, investment into resilience and adaptation, the tools of the private sector into the fight to adapt to climate change. And that's on all of us because the implications spill over in a bunch of different ways, including geopolitical destabilization, migration, food insecurity, and the echoes of that are felt across borders. We've got to be global in responding to that. The second is making sure that we're working together on the industrial capacity to fuel the energy transition. When the president got folks together in Wilmington, Delaware, for a historic quad, and you know, I think this was either before or after he visited his high school with the three leaders. One of the things they talked about was building supply chains in batteries and nuclear and in solar in all of these countries. We have experienced what it's like to have concentrated and brittle supply chains slowing us down. Chips is a great example of that when our factories idled here in the United States. We can't afford to idle because we didn't have the supply chains or the critical minerals to fuel the transition. So that's a global challenge and a global opportunity. And then I think the third piece is policy innovation needs to happen globally and scale globally. And methane's a great example where the U.S. came in, led strongly at home, and as a result, today we have 155 countries that have joined the global methane pledge, and China has committed to including methane in their next nationally determined contribution. That's progress built on U.S. leadership, and I think that's a critical model.
I'm glad you brought up China. So it has been said that there's a push and pull in the White House. One camp are those who think climate is paramount and the most important thing we should do, more so than competition with China. And then there's another camp that believes competition with China is more important and trumps climate. Who's winning that argument?
I think you can have both, and I say this not as a cop-out, but I think as embracing the practical reality that you have a global challenge that requires global cooperation, and you have one of the world's largest emitters, one of the world's largest producers of this technology, and they've got to deploy it in a way that actually bends the curve on their emissions. They got to peak as quickly as possible, and they've got to, I think, put their resources behind this shift and this transition. At the same time, you know, we are absolutely going to compete on the industries of the future, the technologies of the future, and I think that is conducive to both them moving to a clean energy future and the world moving to a clean energy future. If the U.S. and Australia and China and India and the European Union are all racing to build out the advanced biofuels, advanced nuclear, ways to power our data centers more efficiently, integrate solar and storage, build out the grid supply chain, that will help us all achieve the goals together. So cooperation on the goal setting, cooperation on the policy platform that enables the world to achieve 1.5 degrees, and competition on the means to get there. That race to the top on the second will help us get to where we need to go on the first.
You're good. That was excellent. So let's one more sort of toughie. We were talking about the bipartisan infrastructure law, IRA. It took us leaps and bounds ahead. There are also things that aren't working out so well. Want to talk a little bit about EVs and really just throw it open to you. What do we need to improve upon? Where are there some lessons learned on what we can do better on pushing and driving towards a clean energy future?
Yeah, look, I think the electric vehicle transition is being processed more as a stock ticker, and I'd say this with due respect to you because you do long-form journalism, but in general, sort of stock ticker Twitter approach to following whether we're ahead or behind rather than looking at the fundamentals. And when I look at the fundamentals, capital formation in this space has been stratospheric. The United States went from a laggard, especially relative to China, to the #1 nation destination for private investment into the electric vehicle transition. The second big thing that we've seen is battery and lithium catch up to where the market wants to go. Lithium prices had surged, they're coming down, and there's been investment on the supply. Battery prices surged because of COVID, and now they're back on their decline. That's going to propel not just a price parity in the abstract sense, but sticker price parity in the next year or two. August was the biggest year for sales, the biggest year or biggest month for sales in the history of the United States, broke through records on both EVs and plug-in hybrid. I think one of the things that folks maybe are not pulling off of the trends as effectively, from my perspective, is what the industry is doing to iterate with their customers and meet the customers where they are. And one of the big changes we've seen there is a shift in the strategy on plug-in hybrids, where range has doubled in the last 3 or 4 years. And I think that will become a bigger share of the solution, at least in the near and intermediate part, in part to meet range anxiety, which I think is well formed in places where the charging network has not yet shown up.
So the charging network is the key. Just to get a little micro, I'm an EV driver, and that is the primary issue. There was an arrangement made with Tesla to enable those chargers to power all cars, and that's seen quite a bit of hiccup. It's an impressive network, and that would really eliminate that range anxiety. You don't have to really answer that question. It's more of a statement that seems to be a core problem, but that is short term. It is a stock ticker X, whatever, definitely X related issue, because there are longer term battery solves for that will come down the line. But we have reached a hiccup in adoption because of that fear. It sounds like you agree with that.
Between battery technology, charging time improvements in the battery technology, including range expansion, and then just look at the charger network. We've gone from 100,000 to 200,000 in Joe Biden's watch. He set a goal for 500,000 by the end of this decade. We'll get there 3-4 years early. So I think it's building out, but I do think this plug-in hybrid iteration with the market is an ingenious one. It keeps us on the trajectory of where we need to go, but it meets customers where they are.
Fantastic. So we're overtime actually right now. This is the last chance for any protesters that want to come up and tell Ali. No, well, first off, I want to honestly, I want to congratulate you on everything that you've achieved over the course of your term. You've had a lot of bumps in the road. It's been pretty impressive though. So a big round of applause for Ali Zaidi.
Thank you.